Listening, fill in the blanks.
Let's start.
Humans one day step across the same boundary that the neutrinos have. World-renowned astrophysicist Stephen Hawking believes that once spaceships can exceed the speed of light, humans could feasibly travel millions of years into the future in order to repopulate Earth in the event of a forthcoming apocalypse. This is because, as the spaceships accelerate into the future, time would slow down around them. Hawking concedes that bygone eras are off-limits. This would violate the fundamental rule that cause comes before effect.
However much we may abhor it, deception comes naturally to all living things. Birds do it by feigning injury to lead hungry predators away from nesting young. Spider crabs do it by disguise, adorning themselves with strips of kelp and other debris. They pretend to be something they are not, and so escape their enemies. Nature amply rewards successful deceivers by allowing them to survive long enough to mate and reproduce. So it may come as no surprise to learn that human beings who, according to psychologist Gerald Johnson of the University of South California, were lied to about 200 times a day, roughly one untruth every 5 minutes, often deceive for exactly the same reasons. But knowing how to catch deceit can be just as important a survival skill as knowing how to tell a lie and get away with it. A person able to spot falsehood quickly is unlikely to be swindled by an unscrupulous business associate or hoodwinked by a devious spouse. Luckily, nature provides more than enough clues to trap dissemblers in their own tangled webs if you know where to look. By closely observing facial expressions, body language, and tone of voice, practically anyone can recognize the telltale signs of lying. Researchers are even programming computers, like those used on lie detector, to get at the truth by analyzing the same physical cues available to the naked eye and ear.
A person able to spot falsehood quickly is unlikely to be swindled by an unscrupulous business associate or hoodwinked by a devious spouse. Luckily, nature provides more than enough clues to trap dissemblers in their own tangled webs, if you know where to look. By closely observing facial expressions, body language, and tone of voice, practically anyone can recognize the telltale signs of lying. Researchers are even programming computers, like those used on lie detector, to get at the truth by analyzing the same physical cues available to the naked eye and ear. With the proper training, many people can learn to reliably detect lies, says Paul Ekman, professor of psychology at the University of California, San Francisco, who has spent the past 15 years studying the secret art of deception. When the media, communications and information industries make up nearly 8%, our GDP, larger than the car and oil and gas industries put together, we need to be heard, as those industries are heard. But when I see the panel of experts, who've been asked by the Culture Secretary to take a root and branch look at the BBC, I don't see anyone who is a part of that cast and crew list. I see executives, media owners, industry gurus, all talented people, but not a single person who's made a classic and enduring television show.
Coffee was first eaten as a food, though later people in Arabia would make a drink out of boiling the beans for its narcotic effects and medicinal value. Coffee for a time was known as Arabian wine to Muslims who were banned from alcohol by Islam. It was not until after coffee had been eaten as a food product, a wine and a medicine that it was discovered, probably by complete accident in Turkey, that by roasting the beans a delicious drink could be made. The roasted beans were first crushed and then boiled in water, creating a crude version of the beverage we enjoy today.
In the early days of mountaineering, questions of safety, standards of practice, and environmental impact were not widely considered. The sport gained traction following the successful 1,786 ascent of Mont Blanc, the highest peak in Western Europe, by two French mountaineers, Jacques Balmat and Michel Gabriel Pocard. This event established the beginning of modern mountaineering, but the sole consideration over the next 100 years was the success or failure of climbers in reaching the summit and claiming the prestige of having made the first ascent. Such lasting fame would have shocked the humble Grimms. During their lifetimes the collection sold modestly in Germany, at first only a few hundred copies a year. The early editions were not even aimed at children. The brothers initially refused to consider illustrations, and scholarly footnotes took up almost as much space as the Tauchs themselves. Jacob and Wilhelm viewed themselves as patriotic folklorists, not as entertainers of children. They began their work at a time when Germany had been overrun by the French under Napoleon, who were intent on suppressing local culture. As young, workaholic scholars, single and sharing a cramped flat, the brothers Grimm undertook the fairy tale collection with the goal of serving the endangered oral tradition of Germany, capital English zone. Working at the Jotten-Sach Biological Research Station on the banks of the Rio Napo, Beccoloni focused his attention on a group of butterflies called Itomeans. These distant relatives of Britain's Camberwell beauty are abundant throughout Central and South America and the Caribbean. They are famous for their bright colors, toxic bodies and complex mimetic relationships. They can comprise up to 85% of the individuals in a mimicry ring, and their patterns are mimicked not just by butterflies, but by other insects as diverse as flies and true bugs, says Philip DeVries of the Milwaukee Public Museum Center for Biodiversity Studies. Harvesting time depends on the geographic situation, and it can vary greatly therefore according to the various producing countries. First, the ripe beans are picked from the branches. Pickers can selectively pick approximately 250 to 300 pounds of coffee cherry a day. At the end of the day, the pickers bring their heavy burlap bags to pulping mills, where the cherry coffee can be pulped or wet milled. The pulped beans then rest, covered in pure rainwater to ferment overnight. The next day the wet beans are hand distributed upon the drying floor to be sun-dried. This drying process takes from 1 to 2 weeks depending on the amount of sunny days available.
Like, share, subscribe the channel, and press the bell icon for further